The city never truly sleeps. Not in places like this. Rain hammers the pavement in steady sheets, and somewhere beneath the yellow glow of a dying street lamp, a man sits alone in a diner booth nursing a black coffee he's barely touched. He's watching the door. Not because he's expecting someone, because men like him never stop watching doors. This is where we meet the character played by Steven Seagal. No entourage, no backup, no fancy equipment. Just a man in a plain jacket sitting in a corner seat with his back against the wall. Always against the wall. Always facing the exit. That's not paranoia. That's survival instinct. And for someone like him, those two things stopped being different a long time ago. Outside, a black car rolls past the diner window. Slowly. Too slowly. He clocks it without moving his head. Sets his coffee cup down with zero sound. And exhales once, quiet and controlled. Something just changed in the air. He can feel it. And here's the thing about men who've spent their lives operating in the shadows. They don't need someone to tell them when danger is coming. They feel the shift before it happens. Like a change in temperature. Like the moment before a storm breaks. He leaves exact change on the table. Stands up. And walks out the back. Because the front door? That's already being watched. Meanwhile, across the city, in a building that doesn't appear on any public map, a folder slides across a glass table. One name written across the top. Stamped beneath it in thick red ink. Two words that carry the weight of a verdict with no courtroom, no jury, no appeal. Death order. The man who reads it doesn't flinch. He doesn't ask questions. He's not supposed to. His job is not to understand the reason. His job is to make sure the order is carried out, completely, cleanly, and without a trace. This is the character played by Michael Jai White, a man who has never failed a mission. A man built not just from physical training, but from years of absolute discipline, precision, and control. The kind of fighter who could end a situation before most people even realized the situation had started. He reads the file once, closes it, stands up, and begins to prepare. Two men, one city, and a countdown that just started without either of them knowing the other existed yet. Now ask yourself this. If someone powerful decided you were a problem, even if you had done absolutely nothing wrong, would you even know it was coming? Would you feel that shift in the air? Because most people wouldn't. Most people trust that the system is fair, that there are rules, that someone with power can't just decide you need to disappear. But some systems don't work that way, and the order is one of them. Steven Seagal's character reaches a payphone 3 blocks from the diner. He hasn't used one of these in years. But burner phones leave towers. Payphones leave nothing. He dials a number he memorized a decade ago and never wrote down. It rings twice. A voice answers. No name. No greeting. He speaks 4 words. They found the file. Then he hangs up. Whatever that file contains, it's the reason a death order exists tonight. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he always knew this call was coming. He just didn't know when. That's the thing about running from the truth. You can slow it down, but you cannot stop it from catching up. Back at operations, Michael Jai White is handed a briefing. Last known location, physical profile, behavioral patterns, threat assessment. He reads through it methodically. Most operatives skim these files. He reads every single word. Because details matter. Details are the difference between a mission that succeeds and one that leaves loose ends. But something in the file makes him pause. He goes back to the top. Reads it again. Slower this time. The classification date on the death order doesn't match the incident report beneath it. The order was signed before the incident was even logged. How does an organization issue a death order for something that, according to their own records, hadn't happened yet? He closes the file, sets it down flat on the table, says nothing, but something just shifted behind his eyes. And that small shift is going to change everything. Out in the rain-soaked streets, Steven Seagal's character moves through the city with the kind of stillness that only comes from knowing you're being hunted. He doesn't rush. Rushing draws attention. He doesn't duck into shadows dramatically. He walks like a man who belongs exactly where he is. Confident, unhurried, normal. Because the greatest camouflage in a crowded city isn't disguise. It's ordinariness. He reaches a storage unit on the edge of the industrial district, punches in a code, pulls the door up. Inside, behind a false back panel, is a metal case he hasn't opened in 3 years. He opens it now. Documents, photographs, encrypted drives, a small handwritten list of names with dates next to each one. He stares at that list for a long moment. These aren't criminals on this list. These are witnesses, journalists, former agents, people who saw something or knew something they weren't supposed to, people who simply vanished. And this is the real reason the death order exists. Not because he betrayed anyone, not because he went rogue, but because years ago, during his final operation with the organization, he stumbled onto the truth. He saw what they were really doing. And instead of pretending he hadn't seen it, he copied the evidence and walked away. He thought that would be enough. Quietly disappear. Never talk. Never surface again. Let them believe he was no threat. He was wrong. Because organizations built on secrets don't retire people who know too much. They erase them. Eventually. Even if it takes years. Even if you've been completely silent. The moment they feel even slightly threatened, the clock starts. And his clock just started. Now I want to ask you something directly. Imagine you once worked for a powerful organization. You discover they've been doing terrible things. Hurting innocent people. Covering it up. And you have the proof. What do? Do you speak up and risk everything? Do you walk away quietly and try to forget? Or do you do what he did, take the evidence and stay silent? Hoping silence keeps you safe? Tell me in the comments. Because this is actually a question people face in real life, maybe not with secret organizations, but with corrupt bosses, dishonest systems, people in power doing wrong things. What do you do when you know the truth, but speaking it feels dangerous? Think about that. Back to the story. Michael Jai White is standing outside the operations center now, alone in a stairwell, going back through the mission file one more time on a small device. He's pulled additional records. Older ones. Flagged by clearance level, but accessible to someone at his rank. He finds the original report from the operation that apparently triggered the death order. He reads it. Then he reads it again. There's no evidence. Not a single confirmed piece of evidence that Steven Seagal's character did anything wrong. No leaked intelligence. No confirmed contact with outside parties. No verified breach of protocol. Just a note from an unnamed senior director recommending termination. That's it. A man's life reduced to a recommendation from someone who won't even put their real name on it. Michael Jai White stares at the screen. His jaw is tight. In his world, orders are orders. You follow them because the system depends on everyone following them. You don't second guess. You don't ask why. You trust that the people above you have reasons you're not cleared to know. But what happens when you're cleared enough to see that the reason doesn't exist? He pockets the device, walks back out into the rain. And for the first time in his career, he starts a mission without being fully committed to how it ends. That doubt right there, that tiny crack in absolute certainty, is more dangerous than anything that happens next. Because a man who questions his mission is capable of changing it. They meet for the first time in the kind of place nobody chooses to be. A condemned apartment building on the city's east side. Broken windows, hollow hallways, the smell of rust and old concrete. Seagal's character had moved there 20 minutes earlier after picking up a tail near the storage unit. He lost them, but losing them only buys time. He knows they'll find him again. What he doesn't know is who walks through the door first. Michael Jai White enters without announcing himself. No team behind him. No backup. Just him. He scans the room in under a second, spots Seagal's character standing in the shadow beside a window, both hands visible. Neither man speaks immediately. That silence tells you everything. These are not impulsive people. They are both calculating, measuring, reading the situation with the kind of intelligence that doesn't require words. Finally, Seagal speaks. You came alone. Not a question. An observation. White responds flatly. Easier to think that way. And right there, in that tiny exchange, you understand something important. Michael Jai White is already operating outside his orders. You don't come alone to a sanctioned elimination. You bring a team. You control the environment. You eliminate variables. Coming alone means something else. It means he's here to understand, not just to execute. There's a moment in every conflict where the whole direction can change. Where two people who are supposed to be enemies realize they're actually sitting on the same side of a much bigger table. This is that moment. And they both feel it. You were given a file, Seagal says. White nods once. There's something the file doesn't have, Seagal continues. He pulls out a single document from inside his jacket, sets it on the broken windowsill between them. Names, dates, transfer records. Every person the order eliminated that wasn't a criminal. Every person who simply knew too much. White looks at the document without picking it up. His expression is carefully neutral, but his eyes move across every line. This could be fabricated, he says. Seagal looks at him steadily. You already checked the timeline on the death order. You already know it doesn't match. That lands. Because he's right. Michael Jai White did check, and it didn't match. And a man with his experience knows that when official records contradict each other, someone built a false story. And the question is always who benefits from that story. In this case, the answer is the order itself. White picks up the document. Now think about this for a second, because this is something that goes far beyond an action movie. Have you ever been in a situation where you were told one thing, and then slowly, piece by piece, the evidence started telling you something completely different? And the hardest part wasn't finding the truth. The hardest part was being willing to look at it honestly. Because sometimes the truth asks you to let go of something you've believed in for a long time. And that's not easy, especially when that belief is connected to your career, your identity, your sense of purpose. That's exactly where Michael Jai White's character is standing right now. And the choice he makes next defines everything. The building suddenly fills with noise. Heavy footsteps below. Multiple entry points. The order tracked one of them here, and now both of them are caught in the net. White looks at Seagal, then at the document in his hand, then back at Seagal. He makes his decision in under 3 seconds. How many are coming? He asks calmly. Seagal tilts his head slightly. More than enough. White cracks his knuckles once. Then I guess we deal with that first. What follows is not a movie fight scene with dramatic music and slow motion. It's fast, controlled, and brutally efficient. 2 men at the absolute peak of their physical capability, moving through a dark building with complete coordination, even though they've never worked together before in their lives. Because skill at this level recognizes skill. And when survival is the goal, ego disappears completely. They move through the building floor by floor. Every operative that enters doesn't make it out conscious. Not because these 2 men are invincible, but because they are smarter, faster, and more experienced than anyone the order sent tonight. The order made a critical error. They sent hunters after prey that was never prey to begin with. By the time they reach the roof, the immediate threat is handled. The city stretches out around them, a sea of lights in the rain. Both men are breathing harder than normal. Nothing dramatic, just effort. White holds up the document. If I bring this forward, he says slowly, to the right people outside the order, everything changes. Seagal nods. That's why they want it buried. There's a pause. White looks at him directly. Why didn't you go public 3 years ago, when you first found it? And this is where Seagal's character says something that cuts through all the action and all the tension and lands in a completely human place. Because I was afraid, he says simply. I thought staying quiet would keep me safe. I thought if I just disappeared, they'd leave me alone. He pauses. I was wrong about that. And there are people on that list who paid for my silence with their lives. That's the weight he's been carrying. Not guilt over something he did. Guilt over something he didn't do when he had the chance. And that kind of guilt is the heaviest kind because it comes from knowing better and choosing comfort over courage. Now the question becomes, is it too late to make it right? That's what this whole story is really about. Not just survival. Redemption. The chance to fix a mistake that cost others everything. Michael Jai White is quiet for a moment. Then he says something that changes the entire direction of what comes next. I know where the master server is. The one that holds every classified order the organization has ever issued. Every elimination. Every cover-up. Every name. Seagal looks at him carefully. White continues. If we can get that data out and transmit it to external sources simultaneously, they can't suppress it. There won't be enough time to shut it all down at once. Seagal stares out over the city. That building is the most protected location they have. White allows the smallest hint of a smile. Good thing neither of us does this the easy way. And just like that, the mission flips completely. Two men who started this night on opposite sides of a death order are now the greatest threat the order has ever faced. Not because of physical strength alone, but because of what they know, what they have, and what they're willing to do with it. They move through the pre-dawn city like ghosts. Two former weapons of an organization now pointed directly back at it. The headquarters of the order is exactly what you'd expect from people who believe they are untouchable. Imposing, clean, designed to project power. Security systems that rival government facilities. Floors of operatives who have never once imagined something like this could happen. Because when you control the hunters, you stop believing you can ever be hunted. That's their mistake. Seagal and White enter from below. Maintenance access. A level that security assumes is irrelevant because nobody important ever uses it. That assumption costs them the first 6 minutes of response time, which is more than enough. They move upward through the building with the kind of quiet intensity that doesn't need commentary. Floor by floor, obstacle by obstacle. Not theatrical, not reckless, precise. The way people operate when they understand that every single decision has a consequence. Alarms eventually sound. That was always going to happen. But by the time full defensive protocols engage, they are already 3 floors from the server room. The resistance inside is serious. These are not ordinary security guards. These are trained operatives, the same caliber as White himself. And the fights that follow reflect that. Hard, technical, punishing exchanges. The kind where you feel every impact. Where nothing is easy and nothing is clean. But Seagal's character fights with something that trained operatives often lose over years of following orders. He fights with conviction, with the understanding of exactly what he is fighting for and exactly why it matters. And that clarity gives him something technique alone cannot provide. Michael Jai White fights with something else. He fights with the controlled fury of a man who has just discovered he has been used. That his skills, his discipline, his years of service were pointed at innocent people under the cover of protecting something righteous. And there is nothing more dangerous than a powerful person who has just realized their power was manipulated. They reach the server room. Seagal connects the device that begins the transmission. Encrypted files, classified orders, elimination records, financial trails. The entire documented history of the order's real operations begins moving outward simultaneously to 37 independent recipients around the world. Journalists, human rights organizations, foreign intelligence agencies with no loyalty to the order. They have 40 seconds before the first kill switch engages. The door behind them explodes inward. Both men turn to face it. And standing in the doorway is the architect of all of it. The unseen leader who signed the death order. The man who has never once dirted his own hands because he's always had people like Michael Jai White to do it for him. He looks at them both with an expression that isn't fear. It's disbelief. The pure, stunned disbelief of someone who has controlled outcomes for so long that the concept of losing simply hasn't registered yet. You have no idea the scale of what you've just interfered with, he says. Seagal looks at the countdown on his device. Transmission is at 82%. White steps forward slowly. The scale of what we've just ended, he says quietly, is exactly the point. The leader reaches toward a panel on the wall. An override switch. If he activates it, the transmission dies. He doesn't reach it. The 2 men ensure that. 94%. 97. 100. Complete. Somewhere across the city, the first news alert pings. Then another. Then a cascade. Phones light up. Screens flicker. Editors begin making calls. The information is already beyond anyone's ability to contain it. The order's leader sinks into a chair. Not because he's been physically defeated. Because the thing that actually held his power together, secrecy, silence, the ability to erase whatever threatened him, is gone. And without it, everything he built starts falling the moment people start reading what was just sent. Power built on hiding the truth only lasts as long as the truth stays hidden. Seagal and White walk out of the building as the first emergency vehicles begin arriving outside. Not running. Walking. Because running suggests guilt. And neither of them has anything to run from anymore. The rain has slowed to a light mist. The city feels different in the early morning gray. Quieter. Like it's waiting for something to shift. They stop on the pavement across the street. Michael Jai White looks at Seagal. You know this doesn't just go away cleanly. There will be investigations. Questions about both of us. Seagal nods. I know. You're ready for that? He looks at the city for a long moment. 3 years ago, I chose silence and people died because of it. He pauses. I'm done choosing silence. White is quiet for a few seconds. Then he extends a hand. Not a gesture of friendship exactly. Something more earned than that. Respect between two people who came from opposite directions and ended up standing in the same place. Seagal takes it, and then they go their separate ways into the morning. No dramatic exit. No music swelling. Just two men who changed something. Who decided that truth was worth more than safety. That responsibility couldn't be postponed forever. That at some point, you have to stop running from the moment that's asking you to be better. Now I want to ask you something before we wrap this story. Because this isn't really just a film concept. This is actually something worth thinking about in your own life. Steven Seagal's character spent 3 years in silence because he was afraid. 3 years. And in that time, other people suffered because the truth stayed buried. And I don't say that to judge him, because fear is real and powerful, and sometimes it genuinely feels like silence is the safest choice. But is it really? Have you ever stayed quiet about something wrong because speaking up felt too dangerous or too costly? Have you ever watched something happen that you knew wasn't right and convinced yourself it wasn't your problem to fix? We all have. Most people have been in some version of that position. And most of the time we tell ourselves we're being smart, being careful, being realistic. But sometimes that silence has a cost that we don't see until later. And by then, it's harder to undo. The most powerful part of this story isn't the fight scenes. It's that moment when Seagal's character admits he was afraid. Because admitting that is actually harder than any physical confrontation in the entire film. And choosing to act, even after years of choosing not to, even knowing the cost, that's what actually changes things. So I'll ask you directly, if you had evidence of something wrong and powerful people wanted it buried, what would you do? Comment below. Tell me honestly, because I genuinely want to know what you think. And if this story as a film concept actually released in 2026 with Steven Seagal and Michael Jai White, would you watch it opening weekend? Also, who stood out more to you in this story? Seagal's quiet, calculating patience? Or White's internal transformation from loyal soldier to man who chose truth over orders? Drop your answer below, because sometimes the most important battles are not about who can fight the hardest. They are about who is willing to stand for something real when standing costs them something. And that choice, right there, is what separates ordinary moments from ones that actually matter.